Hello, I'm Jen. Welcome back to my channel, Literary Love 123, where I combine my master's in English with my passion for the horror genre to talk about the books that I read. In today's video, I will be talking about my recent reread of my favorite classic novel, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I will also be talking about the nonfiction book, A Vindication of Monsters, essays on Mary Wollstonecraft and Mary Shelley. And I will give my quick thoughts about the new Guillermo del Toro adaptation of Frankenstein. So after this quick intro, I'll be right back to talk all things Frankenstein. So I reread Frankenstein once, sometimes twice every year. And this time going into it, I read it through the lens of grief and my personal experience right now with my mom, who is in end stage Parkinson's and is in hospice at a nursing home right now. So, because Mary Shelley was also dealing with grief when she wrote Frankenstein, the loss of children, still dealing with her feelings about her mother dying when Mary Shelley was only 11 days old. So I highlighted this time these pink markers represent aspects of the novel that really spoke to me in my current stage of grief. So what I'm going to do is just read those passages to you. My courage and my resolution is firm, but my hopes fluctuate and my spirits are often depressed. I I have lost everything and cannot begin life anew. Strange and harrowing must be his story, frightful the storm which embraced the gallant vessel on its course and wrecked it thus. I feel exquisite pleasure in dwelling on the recollections of childhood before misfortune had tainted my mind and changed its bright visions of extensive usefulness into gloomy and narrow reflections upon self. I need not describe the feelings of those whose dearest ties are rent by that most irreparable evil, the void that presents itself to the soul, and the despair that is exhibited on the countenance. It is so long before the mind can persuade itself that she, whom we saw every day, and whose very existence appeared a part of our own, can have departed forever, that the brightness of a beloved eye can have been extinguished, and the sound of a voice so familiar and dear to the ear can be hushed, never more to be heard. I was destined to become the most wretched of human beings. I was tempted to plunge into the silent lake, that the waters might close over me and my calamities forever. Sometimes I could cope with the sullen despair that overwhelmed me, but sometimes the whirlwind passions of my soul drove me to seek, by bodily exercise and by change of place, some relief from my intolerable sensations. Wandering spirits, if indeed you wander, and do not rest in your narrow beds, allow me this faint happiness, or take me as your companion away from the joys of life. Life, although it may only be an accumulation of anguish, it is dear to me, and I will defend it. I know Karma, right? Karma's back there feeling all the feels. I was overcome by gloom and misery, and often reflected I had better seek death than desire to remain in a world which to me was replete with wretchedness. So each time I revisit Frankenstein, new passages stand out to me. And in my current season of grief, those passages deeply resonated within me. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about this nonfiction book, A Vindication of Monsters, Essays on Mary Wollstonecraft and Mary Shelley, which is edited by Claire Fitzpatrick. So it's divided into 5 sections. In that first section, you have a timeline of both Mary Wollstonecraft and Mary Shelley's lives. Then you have a preface, an introduction, a foreword, and an editor's preamble. And then the essays are divided into 4 sections: adaptations, feminism, society, and memoirs. So, first of all, I want to say that this book would be an excellent resource for someone who is new to Mary Shelley and her mother, Mary Wollstonecraft. I knew a lot of this going into it because of my love for Frankenstein and because of my studies in grad school, especially around Mary Wollstonecraft and her work in feminist areas. So I just want to say, if you are new to Mary Shelley, Mary Frankenstein, Mary Wollstonecraft, then this is a great, great book for you to start with. So I do want to talk a little bit about some of the passages that I marked. In the editor's preamble, of course, written by Claire Fitzpatrick, I wanted to talk about this. Scottish historian, novelist, poet, and playwright Sir Walter Scott guessed it was Mary who wrote Frankenstein, because there was some discrepancy or some thoughts that her husband, romantic poet Percy Bysshe Shelley, wrote Frankenstein. He did not. Mary did. So during this time, there were only a few women able to make a living through writing, with the idea considered unbecoming for a woman. So I really kind of honed in on that unbecoming woman, and then the title of this book being A Vindication for Monsters, because I recently presented at an online conference a presentation that was titled Unbecoming Woman Becoming Monsters: Transgressive Appetites in Robert Eggers, The Witch, and Nosferatu. So the idea of an unbecoming woman and a monster, I just really ran with that quite a bit here. So the next passage that I highlighted discusses the new annotated Frankenstein, which is written by Klinger, and I don't recall his first name at the moment, but he notes that Shelley included the line in her novel, "The dissecting room and the slaughterhouse furnished many of my materials." And he writes that the clear indication is that the creature in Frankenstein contained not only parts of human bodies, but also animal parts. As many times as I have read Frankenstein, I just kind of went past really this idea of the slaughterhouse. I had never thought about the idea there that Frankenstein was created with animal parts in addition to human body parts. And so that really just blew me away. And then I really thought this next part was really interesting. Again, I disagree with the theory, but I wanted to bring it up. 2 schools of thought concerning the lack of detail in Frankenstein point to Shelley's explanation that Frankenstein was the result of a challenge to write a ghost story. Thus, this school of thought argues that the creature is nothing more than a non existent vapor or a phantom. Approaching the novel psychoanalytically, scholar Arthur Belfont argues in Frankenstein, the Man, the Myth, the Monster, that Victor Frankenstein created the creature out of his fevered imagination, and that he himself committed all the murders that he blames on the creature. in order to avoid an incestuous marriage with his sister like cousin or childhood friend Elizabeth. So that's a very interesting take, which I will be talking a little bit more about in context of Guillermo del Toro's recent adaptation of Frankenstein. This idea that the creature was just a fabrication of Victor's imagination and that Victor was guilty of the murders. All right, so moving on to something else I found interesting in this nonfiction book. Speaking of his daughter, Mary, Father William Godwin said, "She is singularly bold, somewhat imperious, and active of mind. Her desire of knowledge is great, and her perseverance in everything she undertakes almost invincible." So I just thought that was important to talk about the way that Mary Shelley's father, William Godwin, thought of her. And then this part really spoke to me too. The theme of the scientist who usurps God's prerogative as creator and is punished for it when his unnatural creation turns on him is the one most frequently attached to the Frankenstein tale. Know your place in the divine scheme or else. However, this is in many ways an oversimplified explanation for the story. Originally, when you're looking at the 1818 text, especially, the horrors caused by the creature could more correctly be attributed not to the hubris or extreme pride of Victor Frankenstein, but rather his failure to take responsibility for his work. After all, it is after Victor is overcome with horror and rejects the creature that the creature truly begins to act out in monstrous and vengeful ways. So I really appreciated that pointing out there of what is the true essence of Frankenstein. It's not simply a novel about a man who tries to do what only those who believe in God think God should do, but it's about the failure to take care of what he has created, which goes back to in the novel and in the new Del Toro film also, the creature reads Paradise Lost, which again is about a rejection by a creator. So that is really what the story is. And also, Mary Shelley dealing with the loss of her mother. Again, her mother gave birth to her and had an infection as a result of non-hygienic doctors who didn't wash their hands at that time. So Mary never really got to know her mother, Mary, as of course she was only 11 days old when her mother passed away. So that feeling of rejection, not that her mother intended to leave, but nevertheless, she was not there. And then eventually, when Mary ran away with Percy Shelley, who was older than she was, who was also married at the time, her father rejected her then, even though one of the things that he advocated for was this idea of free love. But he changed his views on it once it, came to his own daughter. So she had felt that rejection of a creator. So that's what this novel is really about. Now I want to move on to the feminism section and some of the passages that I highlighted in that section. So this one is from Don't Feed the Monsters by H.K. Stubbs. Let us conceive of monsters as allegories for negative elements of human nature, and even as terrible occurrences such as the deaths of loved ones. When confronted by these monsters, we usually have a choice over how to act or react, and this determines what we become. And then she writes, the importance of nurture over nature are robust in Frankenstein. And perhaps the author is harsher upon the protagonist's father, who abandons his child through fear and weakness, because Mary herself was abandoned by loved ones repeatedly, like I mentioned a moment ago, but not through their choices, rather due to the tragedies of their deaths. The scientist Frankenstein squanders the opportunity that Mary's mother, Mary Wollstonecraft, lost to raise and educate her daughters, a topic which she had been passionate about and the loss of which affected Shelley strongly. Then I want to move on to this next section of Don't Feed the Monsters. With Godwin's publication, excuse me, with Godwin's publication of Wollstonecraft's memoirs, which he saw as celebrating his wife, this amazing life she had, her intellect, her passion. Public opinion, however, turned very hostile towards the deceased Mary Wollstonecraft due to her unconventional lifestyle, her illegitimate children, love affairs, and attempts to take her own life. It became scandalous. So she then became, again, this word monster, a monster in the eyes of society. So that again goes back to that idea of an unbecoming woman becoming monster, which I feel fits both Mary Wollstonecraft and Mary Shelley, because they pushed back against the conventions of the day to write, to live lives that were their own and not adapting to certain social standards of the day. So if a woman is existing outside of those borders, then she becomes, in the eyes of society, a monster. And I wanted to also talk about this aspect too of Mary Shelley's young life. She was around several romantic poets. I want to talk first of all about Samuel Taylor Coleridge, because Mary had opportunities to listen to her father talk, poetry, intellectual ideas with Samuel Taylor Coleridge. And there's actually a section in Frankenstein where there is a reading of Samuel Taylor Coleridge's Rime of the Ancient Mariner. And Rime of the Ancient Mariner, in that poem, there's this idea of the polar Gothic, which is very much a part of Frankenstein also, as it opens up in the Arctic. So I don't want to dive too deeply into that because I'm just kind of hitting these high points. So this is from Mary's and Motherhood. This is the essay by editor Claire Fitzpatrick. So I want to read this section. Abandoned by her mother and rejected by her stepmother, Mary grew up feeling unwanted. It was no secret how little Mary Jane Clairmont cared for her stepdaughter. Clairmont became jealous of the awe and attention praised upon Mary and also her father. In retaliation, she punished Mary and forced her into chores to try to attempt to pry her apart from that close bond that she had with her father, William Godwin. In a letter written in 1814, Mary actually referred to her stepmother Clairmont as a woman I shudder to think of. Mary saw her stepmother as everything that her mother was not: a Philistine, devious, manipulative, conservative. And she also blamed her mother for taking away her father and that circle of friends that she had built. So, again, this idea of rejection in Mary's life and the treatment that she underwent with her stepmother. Then Mary also wrote, instead of the cheerful voices of the living, I have dwelt among the early tombs of those I loved. That just drove a dagger right into my heart because, again, of the way that Mary didn't have her mother around. And Mary spent quite a bit of time on the grave of her mother. Stories say that's where she learned how to write, by putting paper and then etching it, the etchings of the tombstone. There are also some accounts that state that that is where Mary and Percy first consummated their relationship. But that's neither here nor there. Okay. So this one is an essay by Piper Mejia. My mother hands me a book. She writes, in A Vindication of the Rights of Woman and Maria, or the Wrongs of Woman, Mary Wollstonecraft wrote about the imbalance of power in marriage and motherhood while advocating for equity in education, a conversation that has trickled through generations of women, bolstering their courage to continue the debate and to continue to advocate for equity. So, in A Vindication of the Rights of Woman, Mary Wollstonecraft, Mary Shelley's mother, wrote about the importance of education for women. So I'm just going to say that when it got to the section on society, I just kind of skimmed through that aspect and didn't really talk a great deal about it. So now I'm going to move on and talk about, again, Guillermo, sorry, Guillermo Guillermo del Toro's adaptation. So, in the new annotated Frankenstein that I mentioned a moment ago, the introduction is written by Del Toro, and he talks about the pathos of Mary's creative labors as she persevered through tragedy upon tragedy, abandoned and bereft. And he writes that her equally unloved creature may recognize in our eyes his own yearning for connection. And in that recognition, if only for a moment, we will not feel alone in the world. I felt like that viewpoint is very clear in his adaptation of Frankenstein, which had a brief release in theaters and is now available to stream on Netflix. I have good things to say and a few not so good things to say about the adaptation. So, going into it with my deep love and passion for Frankenstein, I had certain expectations. And Del Toro makes it his own. He does change quite a few things. And I have some mixed feelings about certain things that he changed. If I go into it knowing what he wrote and knowing of his love for the monster, then I can understand some of the changes that he made. I feel like in earlier adaptations of Frankenstein, you don't get the real humanity of the creature that exists in the novel. It's kind of like, the whole green face with the bolts in the neck and the not really able to think deeply. So I do appreciate the depth and the richness that Del Toro gave to the creature. And I thought Jacob Elordi did a great job as the creature. I'm kind of mixing people, now thinking of the creature as hot. I mean, yes, Jacob Elordi is a nice looking young man, but that part really didn't fit the creature. So I had a little few issues with that. Also, Victor is very much over the top horrible in Del Toro's film, almost to an absurdist degree. I don't like Victor in the novel. He is not the greatest person, but there is more dimension to him. But I can see that Del Toro was also making this story in his own way about abandonment, because Victor's father was very abusive to him, and I can see that he then perpetuated that on the creature. So Del Toro is dealing with patriarchal abuse, and I appreciated that. There's a change up of Elizabeth's character in the novel. She is engaged to and eventually marries Victor, and William dies in the novel, Victor's younger brother, as a very young child. However, in Del Toro's adaptation, you have William being born, and in that birth, Victor's mother dies. So he is also, like Mary, dealing with the loss of his mother when he's very young. So I see what Del Toro was doing there. And to have Victor trying to move in on Elizabeth, who is his younger brother's fiance, that I don't really get what was going on there. And then to have the creature not kill anyone until he encounters the men on the ship that Victor has gone to. Okay, in the novel, the creature kills some people very near and dear to Victor, but that is because Victor has rejected him. Victor won't create a partner or a mate for the creature, so the creature takes certain things from Victor, and I'm trying not to spoil the novel too much, or the movie, which this is going to be kind of spoilery, but I understand what he was doing, what Del Toro was doing in some ways, and other ways I don't know. I felt like some of it was like bash us over the head with Victor being the monster, even to the point where you have, I'm pretty sure it's William saying to Victor, "You're the monster." Okay, we get it, but I understand, and I do appreciate that Del Toro makes it clear that Victor is the monster, and the creature only acts in monstrous ways as a result of that lack of nurture. And everywhere the creature goes and tries to reach out for companionship, at best he's rejected, at worst he's abused. And Victor physically abuses the creature in the film, which does not happen in the novel. So a few issues I had. I don't know how to feel. I have mixed feelings about the conclusion of Del Toro's film, where Victor and the creature come to this place of resolution and understanding and forgiveness. That does not happen in the novel either. So I'm still processing, I feel like, some of the ways I feel about Del Toro's adaptation, but there are definite things I like. It's stunningly beautiful too. And like I said, I appreciate that he is painting that creature as more human like than we see in other adaptations, because the creature gains my sympathy time and time again in the novel. And I feel like if someone watches the movie and they feel that for the creature, then they've captured what I feel like is the essence of the novel that Mary Shelley intended for her readers to grasp onto. So if you have seen the Del Toro film and you haven't read Frankenstein, then I highly recommend that you read it. So I appreciate your watching this video. I would love for you to hit like, subscribe, leave a comment. Tell me what you thought about the novel, what you thought about the movie. If you're watching and you don't know what to say, but you want to let me know that you watched, you can leave a little monster emoji. Thank you once again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.